The air smelled of roasted chicken, jollof rice, and freshly baked bread as the warm glow of the dining room chandelier spilled over the long mahogany table. It was supposed to be a night of family bonding, a tradition my father insisted on every Sunday evening. I sat at the far end of the table, deliberately quiet, my eyes fixed on my plate. My father, Chief Adewale, a respected businessman in Lagos, sat at the head of the table, laughing and engaging with my stepmother, Fizeo, and her two children, Tolu and Kemi. I was the odd one out. It wasn't always this way. When my mother was alive, these dinners were filled with laughter and warmth. My father would crack jokes, my mother would scold him playfully, and I felt seen. But everything changed after she died 5 years ago. 2 years later, he married Fizeo, and life became a performance, a perfect picture for outsiders while my existence slowly faded into the background. Tonight, I tried to blend in, to remain invisible. But it was impossible to ignore Fizeo's piercing gaze, the way she looked at me like I was a stain she couldn't scrub out. "David," my father's deep voice broke through my thoughts. "You've barely touched your food. Don't you like it?" Before I could answer, Fizeo interjected, her tone sharp and dripping with disdain. "Of course, he hasn't touched it. He's always sulking like some abandoned child. Maybe if he contributed to the house instead of just existing, he'd have more appetite." A nervous chuckle escaped Tolu, her 18-year-old son. Kemi giggled too, hiding behind her perfectly manicured hands. My father shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tighten. Fizeo had a way of making me feel small, like I was an intruder in my own home. I forced a polite smile. "The food is fine, Dad. I'm just not very hungry." Fizeo rolled her eyes dramatically. "Not hungry? Or maybe you just think you're too good for the food I spent all day preparing. You've been staying in that room of yours all week, doing who knows what, while everyone else is actually working or studying. Some of us have purpose, you know." Her words were sharp, each one slicing through me like a blade. I was 24, a recent university graduate, still trying to find my footing. Jobs were scarce, and though I'd been applying relentlessly, rejection emails piled up in my inbox like tombstones of my ambition. "Fizeo, that's enough," my father said, finally lifting his gaze. But Fizeo wasn't done. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "No, Adewale, it's not enough. This boy sits at home all day, contributing nothing, eating food he didn't buy, and acting like a ghost around this house. You treat him like he's still a child, but he's a grown man. Tell me, David, what exactly is your plan in life? Or are you just going to keep leeching off us forever?" The room went silent. My hands trembled under the table, my chest tightening as humiliation washed over me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I wanted to scream that I was trying, that I sent out applications every day, that I wasn't lazy. But what was the point? No matter what I said, Fizeo had already decided who I was: useless. Tolu smirked, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Kemi pretended to be concerned but couldn't hide her amusement. Finally, I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "You know what?" My voice was low, trembling with suppressed rage. "Thank you, Fizeo. Thank you for reminding me what you really think of me." I clapped slowly, deliberately, each clap echoing in the tense silence. "Stay home, you said? Useless, you called me? Fine." I forced a bitter smile. "I'll make sure you never have to see my useless face again." Before my father could respond, I turned and walked out. The night air was cool against my face as I stepped outside, my heart pounding. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there another second. As I walked aimlessly through the streets, memories of my mother flooded back, her soft voice, her unwavering belief in me. She used to call me her diamond, insisting that I was destined for greatness. But since her death, I'd felt like a dull stone, discarded and forgotten. I ended up at a small, dimly lit park. Sitting on a rusty bench, I buried my face in my hands. For the first time in months, I let the tears fall freely. Why did Fizeo hate me so much? Was it jealousy? Resentment? Or simply because I wasn't her blood? As the night stretched on, I replayed her words over and over. Stay home, you useless. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was useless. But deep down, a tiny spark of defiance ignited. No. I wasn't useless. I just needed to prove it, not to her, not even to my father, but to myself. The next morning, I woke up on that same park bench with a stiff neck and an aching back. My clothes were rumpled, my phone battery nearly dead. I checked my messages, nothing. Determined, I walked to a nearby cybercafe and started applying for jobs again. Hours passed as I sent out applications, tweaking my CV, and even reaching out to old classmates. Days turned into weeks. Every day, I left early and returned late, crashing at a friend's tiny apartment while I searched for work. My friend, Chuka, was supportive, though he didn't fully understand why I'd left home so suddenly. Finally, after 3 grueling weeks, I got an email that made my heart race. It was an interview invitation for a junior analyst position at a well-known consulting firm. I nearly cried from relief. This was it, the chance I'd been waiting for. The day of the interview, I wore my best, and only, suit, polished my shoes until they gleamed, and rehearsed my answers on the bus ride there. The interview went better than I could have imagined. The hiring manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Bello, seemed impressed by my determination and quick thinking. 2 days later, I got the call. I'd been hired. It was an entry-level position, the pay modest, but it was mine. It was proof that I wasn't the failure Fizeo painted me to be. When I received my first paycheck, I stared at the numbers on the screen, tears welling up again. It wasn't just money. It was validation. It was freedom. But even as joy filled me, a bitter thought lingered. Fizeo still believed I was useless. My father hadn't reached out once since I left. Part of me wanted to let them stew in their ignorance. But another part wanted them to see. So, I made a decision. I would go back. Not to beg for acceptance, but to show them who I had become. The following Sunday, I returned home. As I stepped into the dining room, it felt like stepping back in time. The same chandelier glowed overhead, the same dishes filled the table. Everyone froze when they saw me. David, my father said, surprise etched on his face. Fizeo's lips curled into a sneer. Oh, look who decided to grace us with his presence. Did you come back to ask for money? I smiled calmly and placed a small envelope on the table. No, I said softly. I came to return the last bit of allowance you gave me before I left. I don't need it anymore. Confusion flickered in my father's eyes. Fizeo scoffed. And why is that? I took a deep breath. Because I have a job now. A real job. With my own money, my own apartment, my own life. The room fell silent. For the first time, Fizeo's smug confidence faltered. I looked directly at her. You called me useless. You told me to stay home, like I had nothing to offer this world. Well, I left, and I built something for myself. Then I turned to my father, my voice breaking. But you stayed silent. You let her tear me down. You let me walk out of this house thinking I was nothing. My father's face crumpled with guilt, but I wasn't done. You all can sit here and pretend everything is perfect, I said, gesturing to the table. But I refuse to be part of this charade anymore. I stood tall, shoulders squared. This is goodbye. And with that, I walked out, this time for good. Outside, the evening air felt lighter, freer. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I would never let anyone define my worth again. Behind me, through the dining room window, I caught a glimpse of Fizeo's face, shocked, pale, speechless. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's simply living well. 2 weeks passed after that final confrontation, and life slowly began to settle into a rhythm. My small one-bedroom apartment wasn't luxurious by any means. The paint was peeling, the pipes rattled every time I turned on the tap, and the neighborhood was noisy, but it was mine. I woke up each morning with a sense of purpose. My job, though challenging, gave me a new kind of confidence. For the first time, I felt like I was steering my own life instead of drifting aimlessly. Sometimes, people lash out because of their own pain and insecurities. She tried to tear me down, but that didn't mean I had to carry her bitterness forever. I exhaled slowly, letting go of years of resentment. Maybe this was the beginning of healing, not just for me, but for all of us. The next morning, I returned to the hospital, unsure of what to expect. The corridors buzzed with nurses and the faint beeping of machines. When I reached Fizeo's room, my father was dozing in a chair beside her bed. She was awake, her eyes glassy and tired, but alert enough to see me enter. For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy and awkward. Finally, she spoke, her voice weak but sharp as ever. "You came back." "Yes," I replied evenly. "Dad asked me to." Her lips twitched into something between a sneer and a grimace. "I suppose you're here to gloat. To tell me you were right all along." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "No, Fizeo. I'm not here to gloat. I'm here because, despite everything, this family matters to me, even if you've never seen me as part of it." Her eyes softened, just slightly. It was the first crack in her armor I'd ever seen. "You think I hated you," she said slowly. "But I didn't. I envied you." I blinked, caught off guard. "Envied me? For what?" "For the love your father gave you," she admitted, a tear slipping down her cheek. "When I married him, I thought becoming a stepmother would be easy. But every time I saw how he looked at you, how he talked about your late mother, I felt like an outsider. So, I lashed out." Her confession stunned me. All these years, I'd believed her cruelty was about me, my failures, my existence. But now, I realized it came from her own fears of not being enough. "I hurt you because I didn't know how to deal with my own pain," she continued, her voice trembling. "I called you useless because I felt useless in his eyes." My father stirred awake, his gaze darting between us. "Fizeo." She reached for his hand, then looked back at me. "David, I can't undo what I've done. But if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I want to try. For your father. For this family." I stared at her, a storm of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger, it felt safer, cleaner. But another part remembered the promise I'd made to myself, not to let bitterness define me. "I forgive you," I said finally, my voice steady. "Not because what you did was okay, but because I refused to carry that weight anymore." Her tears flowed freely then, and for the first time, I saw her not as a villain, but as a flawed, hurting human being. My father's shoulders sagged with relief. He clasped both our hands, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe this is our chance to truly be a family." Weeks later, things began to shift. Fizeo's health improved, and so did her attitude. She still had her sharp edges, but there was a genuine effort to bridge the gap between us. My father became more attentive, no longer hiding behind silence when conflicts arose. One Sunday evening, as we sat down to dinner, the same setting where everything had once fallen apart, I realized something profound. Healing doesn't come from pretending the past didn't happen. It comes from facing it, forgiving, and choosing to move forward. As I looked around the table, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. Fizeo caught my gaze and gave me a small, tentative smile. This time, I smiled back. Because sometimes, the strongest families are not the ones without scars, but the ones who learn to grow through them. Anger and resentment may feel powerful, but they only trap you in the past. True strength comes from forgiveness, not for others, but for yourself, so you can step into the future free and whole.